Awesome. Thank you, Nikita, Zeb, and Adam for this amazing conversation on vibe coding. So we're going to go right into our next discussion. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm a venture partner here at Madrona, and we're going to talk about agentic productivity. So in our new world of Gen AI, we've all been promised amazing productivity, that the toil in our lives is going to go away, either made easier or just happen magically for us. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's real today and what that looks like coming. And for that discussion, we have an amazing panel of some household names in enterprise productivity today, Atlassian and Slack, and then one of the fastest growing startups in this space in Read AI. And so maybe to dive right in, just go down the line and have you talk about like what are you currently doing in your company on productivity, agentic productivity?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Anu. I'm the president of Atlassian. At Atlassian, we think a lot about teamwork. Our stock ticker is team. And so really, when we think about productivity, we think about how do we make teams productive, not just individuals productive. So we build an agentic platform called Rovo, which basically does search, chat, and custom agent building. So a lot of our customers use it to produce custom agents that can perform tasks, that can automate workflows in the context of enterprise teamwork. So what makes Rovo special is that, of course, you can do the basics of do summarization, do automation, go through email triage, that sort of thing. But you can deploy it in a work context such that working across humans and AI agents becomes as natural as working across a team of humans. And what we've found with that is well over 78% of the folks that have deployed report productivity increases either through hours saved or the ability to do things that they weren't able to do before.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm Rob. I'm the CPO at Slack. As far as what we're doing, so a number of different things. So we have a mixed strategy where we're going to have native AI and agentic features within Slack, but we also want to be the home of all the agents that companies like yours build and employees experience in their day-to-day lives. So for our native stuff, we're spending a ton of time helping people discover insights, knowledge, conversations that previously, frankly, have been somewhat difficult to find in Slack. We're also helping them manage like an increasing influx of information from people, but also from agents that are now communicating with them. But we want to be the place that the overwhelming majority of enterprise agents are experienced. And we think we have the right to do that because I think many of you probably use Slack in here. I heard Vercel talking about it. I saw you using it earlier. But the average person has Slack open about 10 hours a day and actively uses it about 2 hours a day. And if you think of these agents, they're like a teammate, to your point, right? And they should be right there with your colleagues. And we're just kind of, I think, a natural place to experience those. So we're spending a bunch of time working with companies like Atlassian and Read to actually evolve our app framework and our APIs to make it a really, really welcoming place for agents so you can deploy them there.
Yeah, on our side, we're building the system of record for meetings, and we've been doing that for the last 3 years. And I like to say that we're taking jobs that nobody wants. So if you've ever been in a meeting and somebody says, hey, you're the person that has to take the notes, you feel really bad because you're probably the least senior person in the room because they want you to take notes. So we're getting rid of that job. We're making it agentic. We do it better than anybody else. And then what we're focusing on next is the system of record for productivity. So it's working with partners like Slack, Atlassian, and being able to go in and take the data that we have available through meetings, through emails, through messages, and then start to drive actions where it automates that process. So a good example would be HubSpot. We're able to go in and look at all the emails, messages, meetings that someone has, and we can push a notification to the user to say, hey, we think you should update this HubSpot opportunity. Here are the 4 reasons why. The user says yes. We will push that into HubSpot, and it will automatically update that opportunity. So we're not trying to be the hub in the sense of you come to our site and do everything. We just want to streamline that process so these other systems of records actually get more traction.
Awesome. So with that, let's dive into what do you think the experience looks like? Is this a copilot that sits next to the experiences where we're spending our time? Is it something that happens asynchronously in the background and work just gets done? Is it a new experience? Are we expected to interact with something new every day when we come to work? And it builds a little bit on Rob's pitch on Slack, but maybe just go down the row again.
Yeah, I would say the answer is yes. So in many ways, I think the beginning of AI adoption across all of our customers, maybe some context, we have about 300,000 customers at Atlassian, so We serve a wide swath of customers, which is atypical for an enterprise company because we have a large set of SMBs as well as enterprises. And typically when any company starts with AI adoption, they start with the copilot model of, okay, I have somebody to assist me through my tedious jobs and how do I get that done. And then people start reimagining workflows. So workflows that weren't possible before, things like customer feedback, for instance. We recently acquired a company called Cycle, which basically looks at vast swaths of customer feedback and allows you to construct a workflow such that you can close the loop, look at feedback, analyze themes, and get back to the customer, which was simply not possible before. So it's not that customers are taking a workflow and upgrading it, they're reimagining workflows. So for things like that, it's brand new experiences that they did not think of before. And we recently made an acquisition of the browser company. And that is really a bet on how the user experience is going to completely be reimagined. Because think about the app that you use the most today, right? All of you work in browsers all the time. But the browser interface has not changed much at all. And for an AI native browser experience to really capture the day-to-day of your work, the context of your work, save personal memory and organizational memory differently, and be able to prefer a completely reimagined experience, we think that that's where the future is going to be. So really a reimagined AI native browser experience where you can have AI native skills, where you can have agents assisting you, but also where you can construct your own agent on the fly with the browser. That's really what we think the future is going to evolve towards. So it's going to be a mixture of very many different kinds of experiences.
Yeah, makes sense. And Rob, you gave a little bit of this in your intro, but maybe keep building on thoughts there.
Totally. So I think similar to what you said, like maybe some debate about what the browser is, whether it's the browser or it's within Slack necessarily within an enterprise. But I think of a combination of assistants and agents that are there for any given individual. And I think there's going to be an enduring need, I think, for the assistive use cases that are deeply personal. Like understand you as an individual, how you write, your voice, your tone, the emojis that you use, who you report to, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's definitely a use case for the assistants, but for these agents, I think what's interesting is like I think they can appear to you as an assistant at a point in time, you know, for something you're trying to get done as part of your role or part of the team that you're part of. But I also think they're obviously going to be operating in the background more. And what I don't think we've figured out yet, I think there's some inspiring stuff coming out of LangChain with the Agent Inbox open source project. But I don't think what we've figured out yet is like what exactly is the experience for managing or being aware of all the agents that are acting on my behalf as part of my job or as part of just me being me as an individual. And how do those things interrupt me? How do I know when I need to point them 45 degrees to the right of where they're at right now, or give them slightly different instructions because they're stuck? I don't think we have a great user interface metaphor for that. And that's something we're thinking about deeply. I also think, like to your point, you know, you're going to find situations where an assistant doesn't quite do it, or the agents that you have at your disposal don't quite do it. So you're going to need to create something on the fly. And I think that all of that's going to need to happen within a very similar experience.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as both of them. So the way that we think about it is a teamwork or is a team member, coworker, and on Slack, we've run into some issues where we're like, hey, it'd be great if I could actually bring the AI into Slack and actually tags not just a person, because that's a workflow that you're used to. Hey, I don't know the answer to this, but can I tag my assistant that then can go in and tap into my storage of knowledge and actually respond into Slack and give an update on the project where I might not even know about what the status is because I've got 12 other people working on it, but that storage of intelligence brings all that data set together. So I think it's not going to be a new way to work in the sense of, hey, you're going to go and no code or vibe code these agents that you're going to use on your day-to-day. I think it's just going to be as simple as like you tag someone on there, an agent, but you don't know it's an agent, and it's going to do the work for you. On the flip side, I think the agents working in the background are actually highly valuable. So to give you an example, we work with a Mag 7 company. They've got 200 product managers. Those product managers on average do 5 interviews every single week with customers. So 200 product managers across the globe, 5 interviews each. They have 1,000 customer interviews every single week. That data is not shared across the team, and nobody has time to look at Japan versus the Netherlands versus the US and combine all that data together. But if an agent in the background is going and saying, hey, look up when people have canceled their plan. After they've canceled their plan, look at, have we done an interview? We've done an interview. What's the thing that said that the reason why they canceled? Now you've got all this logic in place to go into Jira and say, hey, I want to create a ticket. Or, hey, I'm going to ping the customer service rep to say, what's going on here? Because this seems like this is a trigger for people to cancel. That level of automation is what we're going to see, I think, in the next year or two.
Yep.
Building on that question on experience, so how many agents do we all end up with? And what does that feel like, like when we do this, right? Like, is there really one experience to rule them all? Is there one agent to rule them all? And if not, how do I end up not being where I ended up in the SaaS world, right? Where it is, I've got all these silos and 10 different things and 10 different places to go. Like, how do you think that plays out? How much does consolidation end up? And do you see this swinging back and forth, or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's in many ways there's a lot of symmetry to the SaaS play out as well in that. So I think the more interesting question to ask is not how many agents, but really how do you interact with these agents? And the agents have varying levels of competence and autonomy, and how do you manage and orchestrate those? And like Rob was saying, LangChain, we have some early kind of possibilities of that experience, but as you think about it more and more in a larger scale context, in a company context, it's very important that you understand, okay, what agent is doing what piece of work and what role does it play in the overall outcome you want to achieve, right? So in that way, I think workflows are going to be very important, and every company, every team, every individual works differently. So we've found it more useful to think about what are different workflows that you go through. Do you need one or multiple agents for that? And how do you combine all of those and orchestrate that together? And in many ways, planning is a natural kind of task for Jira, Trello, a lot of the products we build to do. Yep. So the paradigm we use is really, instead of people orchestrating different pieces of work or an individual having different jobs to be done, that they orchestrate those jobs, what happens when there are multiple agents potentially doing that? And how do you best represent that experience? So we have, like I was explaining with Rovo, the agent building platform, we have well over 100,000 workflows being managed by these agents. So as that scale grows, I think the experience will also evolve. So it's interesting to see how you can manage and orchestrate these agents at scale.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think like one of the things that we will say in Slack when we're building our product is we'll often say, like, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and like we'll create a problem and then eventually we'll make a bouquet out of it. And I think that we're in that situation right now with agents where it's hard to say, what the bouquet is going to look like, but we're definitely letting 1,000 flowers bloom right now. And you can see parallels to SaaS where I can just see browser tabs in my head, right? Which is like I have to remember what browser tab or agent to go to. And I think one of the things we're banking on or hoping for is that both the search and the concept of like a personal assistant to you are going to have access to the metadata about these agents and can effectively route those to you. Because one of our product principles is don't make me think, and I think we're definitely creating a situation right now in software where users are having to think. They're having to hop between multiple agents, and so. I love the emerging standards we're seeing. I love the open source work from Agent Inbox. I love what we're seeing with A to A and MCP, because I think that's going to foster a world where these things can talk to each other, know about each other, and then our personal assistants and search experiences can help route us to the right thing rather than us having to know who to go to for necessarily like translating meetings into Jira tickets for a PM.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. My take is it's going to be a lot like advertising. So if you think about advertising, where Facebook first came out, Google came out, you had to buy on their platforms. They didn't allow any third parties to kind of play in those platforms because they said, we've got the best technology, you shouldn't be able to use this. Over time, they started to go in and say, like, hey, we're going to let anybody in. And then all of a sudden, everyone's doing all these things. And then all of a sudden, you're going to pull back and then say, like, we're going to choose select partners to come into this ecosystem. That's the whole ad tech space is built on. There's a company called The Trade Desk that's worth about $50 billion that has gone in and said, we are that independent third party that connects the dots from Facebook to Google to Snapchat to Roku to Hulu, and bringing all that inventory together and then optimizing against that. I think there will be less agents over time. There will be less agents over time, and there'll be less companies that are managing or orchestrating those agents. And I think the platforms are going to do incredibly well, where people are going to plug in those agents into those platforms, and with the right permissions and the right outcomes, you can build conversion models. So if you think about it, we're doing this now. So if you think about a conversion model, I can go in and see all your emails, all your messages, all your Slacks, all your Jira tickets, your Confluence, your meetings, all that information. And I can go and say, did a sale close on Salesforce? Did that opportunity actually close, or did that fail? Now I can actually just train a model and go backwards and say, what were all the metadata points? And now as new data comes in, I can actually predict what's going to happen. That's ad tech applied to AI. And that's really about solving the problems. And if you can solve those problems, Trade Desk all day long, people will let them put pixels on their site because they know they're going to drive ROI and that they're also safe.
It's a really interesting point because I do think the granularity of an agent over time is going to be really interesting to watch, because they're very fine-grained right now.
Yep.
And it's going to be interesting to see, as context windows increase and the concept of context rot kind of declines, like, can agents be bigger in their scope and still be effective? And in that case, there's certainly going to be less of them. So it's going to be interesting to watch that.
Yeah. And so again, great segue, building on that topic, so if you imagine the world as I very much buy everything that you said, it's going to be a set of agents, both because we need specialized functionality and otherwise, but the user wants some rolled up experience. And the deal closed in Salesforce, you don't want 3 different agents who said, hey, by the way, I just realized this. How in this combined set of agents does that ecosystem play nice, right? That there is a sharing of data and context when people want their own data. It's a bit of an advantage, but certainly from the user experience where I sit, I just want this all to work, right? How do you think that plays out?
Yeah, I think that's a very key factor in how the evolution of these agents happen. Because look at it from a customer's perspective, they just want to unlock the outcome, right? To the example he was giving, did the deal close or not? What's the likelihood that it closes or not? And to that end, it's imperative that there has to be an open ecosystem where the data gets shared in a meaningful way, but also in a trustworthy way. Yep. So in many ways, the breaking of silos, I think, is pretty much a thing that's going to be inevitable for the ecosystem to thrive and do well. At Atlassian, we've always had an open ecosystem, simply because we started the company with the belief that, we can just sell software on the internet. And for that to work, we had to be an open, extensible API system. And doing that just helps break those silos. And in a workflow, to the example that he was giving, there's multiple different SaaS apps you're interacting with today. So even let's take away AI from it. If you look at it from a perspective of today's SaaS world, you interact with so many different applications. You don't want to be in the browser hell that we were talking about earlier, tab hell. So really, for the reasoning agent, for reasoning to be meaningful, you want to have one unified set of insights where all of your data can be put to work and you can get to meaningful outcomes as a unit, as a team, as a company. And so I think it's going to be fairly inevitable. This is why with Rovo, we built about 50 data connectors. And the thing that has been surprising to me is we have about 2.3 million monthly active users of Rovo. And the surprising trend I see across that is how much all of these data connectors get used and integrated. And the outcomes that people achieve are going to be so much better when they have multiple connectors put together. And then they look across all of these systems across one single pane of glass.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be really interesting to see over time how this plays out physically from a technology perspective, because I do think we all kind of have to be Switzerland. Customers are going to choose, right? Customers want the outcome, to your point. And so at Slack, obviously, we started as Switzerland as well. Many of you build apps into Slack, and we want that vibrant ecosystem. I think the thing that we're all going to have to figure out together is it doesn't necessarily make sense for Slack to store all of Reed's data and Reed to store all of Slack's data, and Slack to do the same for Atlassian and vice versa. It's how do we effectively share information in a security-aware way and share metadata about our agents so that they are aware of each other and can call each other, and do that in a scalable and performant way, as this ecosystem continues to evolve. So I'm really encouraged about what we're seeing from a federated API perspective. Also really encouraged about what we're seeing from a protocol perspective as well with MCP.
Yeah. And from a startup perspective, I think it's important to just show value to the end customer because they have so many options. So many people are asking for API access. It actually costs both of these companies a lot of money to feed that data back and forth. And so if you're a startup and you want to just get access to it, you have to show value to the end client where they say, hey, I could use this. It makes the core product better. Yep. And a lot of people skip that step. If you look at a lot of the startups, it's like, hey, how do I disintermediate Slack? How do I disintermediate Atlassian? And they know that these people have seen it more than enough times to say, oh, you're pulling down the data to do this. I know what you're going to do. Don't do that. But if you actually go in there and you say, I'm going to contribute data back that makes the platform better, you see that stickiness. And I think that's where, on the ad tech side, it has done that time and time again, where it's increased the cost of advertising online because you can drive better performance. That's why there's a company called AppLovin that's almost worth $500 billion, where 4 years ago they were worth like $50 million or $100 million. Like, these opportunities exist, but you have to play within the rules and you have to contribute back.
It's a ton of sense. And so for last question, and then we'll try to take a couple of questions from the audience. So in that, I love the way you framed that, David. And so I kind of know what you're all going to say, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Is it better to be an incumbent in this race, or is it better to be a startup? Like, is it better to be sitting on the data and user experiences and try to make it nimble, or is it better to be nimble and trying to figure out how to get data?
I think both approaches have merit. Of course, being at a company that has 300,000 customers, there's inherent advantages to the distribution, to the customer understanding and knowledge you have. But of course, being in a small startup that can go much faster, can be more responsive, there is inherent advantage to that. I would reframe that question more as, I think the people that are definitely going to be in trouble are those that think, oh, things are changing too fast, so let's wait to respond. That's not a luxury any of us building technology have. So even with our own experience of having built Rovo, reasoning is getting so much better just over a matter of months, right, not years. So a lot of what we build really has to change. And it's not the usual thing of let's plan for a quarter and then carefully say this is what's going to be out in one quarter. It's much more dynamic than that. So I think that whether you're an incumbent or a startup, you really have to change the way you build software. You really have to change the way you deliver software and what you think is meaningful software. And that's really worked for us. And the second thing I would say that's interesting for the audience also is for a very long time, you used to hear speed is the moat. That's really the moat for any company. And I think speed is required, it's necessary, but not sufficient. I think also if you're building for companies, not just for individual consumers, security, privacy, governance, all of these matter. And they're important moats to have, because once something disastrous happens, it's really hard, especially for a startup, to recover from that. And so if you're building for companies, I would say think about security first, privacy first, irrespective of the size of the company.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would echo. I mean, I think as a small company or a startup right now, like the upside is you're unencumbered by customers, but the downside is you're unencumbered by customers, right? And I think the inverse is true for the incumbents. Like, we're encumbered by our customers, but we also have customers. And so I think the hard thing for incumbents right now is like, how do you maintain the customer love with the product that you created that customer love with and that they love you for, while trying to keep pace with everything that's going on in the startup ecosystem. And I think that's a combination of organic and inorganic things that you can do, right? So as large companies, we can acquire smaller companies like yourselves, but we also have to, I think to your point, like operate very differently. So if you look at Slack and look at Salesforce, the way that we build Agentforce, the way that we build the native features within Slack for AI is just very different than how we do the existing features of those particular products. And so we kind of treat those areas entirely differently than we treat the rest of the product stack, and to keep up with that pace, if you will. Because I just think right now, like I actually think plans at this point are kind of pointless because everything's changing so quickly. And so we really try and have this prototype the path mentality where we're like in code as quick as possible and iterating, because you just have to have that pace in this particular space, or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, totally resonates what you just said. I think being nimble is the key when it comes to the AI age. I've been in a couple startup ages now. mobile phones, internet, all that good stuff. And this has never been as compressed as it is right now. Like, I have FOMO looking at these other startups where it's like, hey, 6 months from now, you built a $200 million business or 100 million. Now it's like 3 months, 30 days. These numbers are crazy. And the stickiness is still up in the air. Are they going to retain those customers? But it is going in and saying, if you are nimble, the market will react to something that you build that is valuable, and they will come to you. They will talk about you if you build something valuable. And I don't think we've ever had that at the level of scale that we do today. And so that's incredibly exciting for me. But it's also very challenging because if you have a product, it starts to get some traction, somebody else can come in and add another feature because they can no-code a core part of it. And they add additional novelty where it's like, this is great. All of a sudden people will start to move over. So it is important to actually figure out like, what is the next thing? But I agree, it's not about years out. I haven't done a 1-year plan in the last 4 years since I started Read. It's really quarter by quarter that you're looking at it. And you have a broad vision to look at it, but it really is quarter by quarter.
Thanks. Very nicely done and tactfully answered. So we have time for one question from the audience, if someone has a question. Do we have a mic?
Has anybody commented on how bright these lights are?
Understandably, I think the conversation's been around enterprise agents, but when you switch jobs, do you have to restart with your own agent again? And how do you think of that? And how do you also think of like consumer agents versus enterprise agents, right? Because I'm a person, I have personal stuff and I have business stuff. Do you think about how you make that transition and make it just kind of more holistic from a user standpoint?
I'll take part of that. So from our perspective, about half of our customers are emerging markets. And in those emerging markets, it's usually individuals that are kind of stepping up and saying, I'm going to buy a license against that. And what they're doing is they're actually bringing AI into their workplace. They're getting more efficient. They're putting more data into the system, and they're optimizing their day. So the companies haven't paid them. They're not reimbursing them. They're just going in and using it, up to the point where we've got about 1% to 2% of Colombia's population in every week using Read AI. We've got 1% of South Africa's population using Read AI anytime in a given week. And so the next thing that comes up is like, hey, I bought this. I should own all this data. And we are actually working on a concept where there's a storage of intelligence where it's enterprise data, but there's also storage of an intelligence of who's important to you. How quickly do you respond to people? How do you approach different topics that come up to you? So that becomes a model that you could take to your next job where there's less of a ramp up time, because you could say, this is how I do it. This is how I like things set up, almost like a desktop, but more. And you plug that in, all of a sudden you're going at your new job, while the company keeps that storage of intelligence where this is the work product that I created, this is the IP that I created. So I think we're very close to that. I'd say about a year or two away from that, where you will carry your data wherever you go.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting, both as a consumer, but also as an enterprise. When an employee leaves your company, what do they take with them? And what do you retain, right? And that has never quite been as discrete a question as it has been now. But an interesting example is there was a new person on my team, and because AI is such a great leveler, the AI native new grads who come in are able to do things that the rest of us didn't quite think of. And they built a new user onboarding agent, which was really fascinating to say, okay, what's the level of expertise you already have in said domain? And you can choose your own kind of adventure from there as to how you want to onboard and what pieces of information are relevant to you based on your team, based on your geo. And so it was hyper-personalized, and it really cut down our onboarding time by a big factor, depending on what level of onboarding you were going to take on. I think the separation between memory is an interesting evolving question, but also as people kind of switch between projects and do context switches between companies too, I think it's going to get a lot more efficient and productive to be able to do that. So that also gives rise to interesting behavioral changes across people, and what are they incentivized to do? How much more can they take on, both across personal and work boundaries? And going back to the topic of the panel around productivity, that definitely feels like an exciting frontier to explore.
It's a really profound question. We think a lot about eventually getting to the point where you have two Slack identities, your personal one and your professional one, and you can join multiple Slack instances with each of those. I think we're unfortunately in a place right now where individuals are more willing to bring their personal data to work than companies are to allow an individual's personal work data to leave the four walls of that company. But I do think that absolutely has to change over time. I don't exactly know how it's going to play out, but a subset of how you worked, like I'll just use Slack as an example, but a subset of how you worked within Slack or Jira or Read within, say, Salesforce when I leave and go somewhere else is immensely valuable to me and to my next employer, specifically for that onboarding ramp time, and I think people will eventually come to see that. But the technical mechanics of how we make that happen is going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. We have a nice hand for the panelists.
Thank you.
Awesome.